Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Appleton School Board Candidate Forum. My name is Jean Roberts and I am president of the League of Women Voters of Appleton. We are sitting or standing on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of indigenous peoples. Here where I sit and stand, these are the homelands of the Menominee people. The Menominee Nation, or people of the wild rice, have always been in what is now Wisconsin area, as well as Michigan and Illinois. According to their creation story, the ancestral bear emerged from the ground at the mouth of the Menominee River, and the creator transformed the ancestral bear into human form as the first Menominee. Bear was joined by eagle, crane, sturgeon, and elk. These ancestors continue to live and influence the Menominee as caretakers of creations, and we thank them. By acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional land of these sovereign nations, we honor with gratitude the land itself and all of the winged, two-legged, four-legged, many-legged, and the water peoples who have stewarded the land and water throughout the generations and for generations to come. Thank you all. And thank you for your interest in this forum and your support of the democratic process. We are offering this forum simultaneously in English and Spanish. Please click on the globe icon at the bottom of your page for Spanish. Do not click on the English option within that globe to continue in English. This is a nonpartisan candidate forum for voters to get to hear what the candidates have to say. It is not a campaign event and not a debate. We stand for civil discourse. The candidates understand that no candidate information is allowed to be displayed during this event. This Zoom forum is being recorded and will be made available on both vote411.org, the League's Webby Award-winning website, and the League of Women Voters of Appleton website. It is also being live streamed on Facebook. We ask all those watching this forum to refrain from making any partisan comments on the League of Women Voters Facebook page. Any partisan comments will be deleted to conform with the League of Women Voters nonpartisan policy. Any questions previously sent to the League's email will be sent to the candidates, and their answers will be added to the candidate voter guide. The League of Women Voters of Appleton owns the copyright to any audio or visual recording to these events. Unauthorized videotaping falls under the rules of the FCC, which requires that a forum must not be edited and must be broadcast in its entirety, either live or reasonably soon after it takes place. In addition, the League of Women Voters of Appleton candidate forums must not be referenced as a source in any campaign materials. While there is not a sign language interpreter, there will be closed captioning available on the YouTube video, which will be available through the League of Women Voters website. Prior to tonight's forum, residents were invited to submit questions to the League email. Some of those questions will be heard tonight. These questions have been sorted before they were sent forward. This was not to eliminate questions, but rather to group them into like categories so that we have the opportunity to ask as many questions as needed to cover a variety of topics. We have a timekeeper. The League has always found this process to be a good means to keep us on track and moving along. It is not meant to cut people off or diminish the importance of a response, but simply to use our time wisely. We trust that our local Wisconsin candidates will respect these constraints so that there will not be a need to use the mute button or to cut them off. And finally, we would like to acknowledge the candidates, Kay Eggert, Sherry S. Hartzheim, and Amber McGinley. We would also like to acknowledge that Ed Ruffalo, who is also a candidate for school board and was invited to attend this candidate forum. Mr. Ruffalo politely declined our invitation for this event as he has decided not to participate in any candidate forums for this election. We are grateful and thank them all for their willingness to run for office and serve their community. Jacqueline Klimaszewski is Director of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters. Jackie has planned and organized this forum. She will be presenting the questions to the candidates. Jackie?
Thank you, Jean. Let me add my gratitude to the candidates for your time this evening to share your viewpoints with our voters. And I want to thank all of you listening to this now or on recording for caring enough to be informed when you cast your votes in the election on April 6th. I have the pleasure to moderate this forum tonight, and I have lots of questions, as Jean described, some from the League, some submitted from interested citizens ahead of time. And also, as a part of the League's attempt to get more students involved in the democratic process, I will be introducing representatives from East, West, North, and Central to present questions on behalf of their school. All questions submitted, asked and unasked, will be sent electronically to the candidates, and their written responses will be on the League website for you to view and use when deciding your vote. For each question, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond, and that's going to be moderated by our timekeeper, Julie, and you will see her on one of the screens with her timing paddles. Thank you, Julie. The time may be altered for longer or more involved questions. The first one will be 2 minutes, and after that, we will go to 1.5 minutes. We will alternate which candidate replies to the questions so they each have a chance to go first and last in responding to the questions. And we are going to take, before we get to the questions, the candidates will have that 2 minutes to introduce themselves, give their background, their interest in the school board seat, going in the order that they will appear on the ballot. So that will be candidate McGinley, candidate Hartzheim, candidate Eggert. And then before each round, each question, I will tell you what the order is. And if you want to jot down anything in terms of the question, feel free. All right, are we all set then? We can get started with candidate McGinley. Tell us about yourself and your background and why you're interested in being on the school board.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I have lived in Appleton for nearly about 18 years now. I have 3 boys, ages 12, 10, and 7, who are all minority children. They are Latino. 2 of my children are special needs and are on the spectrum. As a parent in the district, I feel it's critical we have parents on the school board. My educational background includes an associate's degree in criminal justice, and I'm just about 6 credits shy of a bachelor's degree in legal studies, which I have received honors for. My professional experience includes mental health in the medical field and a business background. My community involvement includes serving on the Ferber Elementary Parent-Teacher Organization as Vice President, the elected Parent and Families Representative on the AASD, Appleton Area School District Truancy Task Force, and the president of AASD Special Education PTA, SEPTA, which along with myself and other parents created. I have a proven history of working across the aisle with a diverse group of people on a very specific issue, protecting our children, our most vulnerable population, which some of you are aware of this issue, was truancy court. My advocacy on education, particularly in special education, seclusion and restraint, led to an invitation from Governor Evers himself to come to the governor's office in Madison and to the signing of the bill, Act 118 for seclusion and restraint, which ironically was exactly 1 year ago today. As I have always believed, again, it is extremely important to have parents with children enrolled in AASD on the board.
Thank you, candidate McGinley.
You're welcome.
Candidate Hartzheim.
Many thanks to the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to give you a bit of information about myself and my desire to help the students and families of this district by joining the Board of Education. As you already heard, my name is Sherry S. Hartzheim, and I am a retired business owner with decades of experience in internal accounting, human resources, and business management. But I think most importantly, I'm a parent of an AASD student. I understand that I'm not like many others on the school board, and I don't come directly from the educational institution. As such, I believe I can be a great asset and a reflection of the vast majority of other parents and guardians of students in this district. There's not only one way to achieve success for every student every day, and it's my firm belief that it will take a cross-disciplinary approach to achieve that success. I have led businesses with accountability by setting goals and defining metrics, regularly measuring and reviewing them, and implementing changes to meet goals that are not met. In those ways, I do not believe that a successful school district should be managed any differently than a successful commercial business. My interest in a position as a member of this school board began during the late days of last school year, but continues to grow as I follow how we've moved through these unprecedented times. I am interested, involved, and passionate about serving the families of our district. It is my sincere desire to join this board in helping to move us all forward through measured decision-making based on earnest listening to all the stakeholders of the experience and clear, measured, and measurable, attainable metrics. I look forward to service to all the families of this district, and I am grateful for your time tonight.
Thank you. Candidate Eggert?
Good evening, and first, thank you to the League for organizing this forum and for all of the efforts to inform voters. So again, my name is Kay Eggert. I am seeking re-election to the Board of Education for the Appleton Area School District. I firmly believe that all students deserve quality education. I also believe that strong public schools are fundamental to delivering on this commitment to all. Public schools are critical in helping all children reach their potential and be prepared for their futures. And great public schools also contribute to the vitality of our communities. I am seeking re-election to build on the district's foundation of educational excellence. I'm a longtime resident of Appleton. My husband and I moved to the community about 30 years ago for work and also to raise our family here. All four of our children graduated from Appleton East High School, well prepared for their academic and career pursuits. As testament to their positive experiences, I proudly share that so far, two have moved back to the community to raise their families and now also to benefit from the Appleton Area School District. I bring to the board experience. I have knowledge of educational issues as well as operations of the district. And I'm currently serving as the board president. I'm a positive voice for public schools and for the district. I would be honored to continue serving on the Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you. For our next question, we will start with candidate Hartzheim, then move to candidate Eggert, and then move to candidate McGinley. What are the leadership responsibilities of school board members in collaboration and building consensus with administration, parents, teachers, and the community? Please describe past experience with conflict resolution, consensus building, and seeking out ideas and feedback for your position on issues.
I hope I get at least 2 minutes on this one, Jacqueline.
We have a minute and a half.
Okay. Describing leadership. School board members are leaders in the community because they've been chosen by the taxpayers to represent them as board members to the business that is public education. So it is a responsibility of those people to take the input of the taxpayers, in particular the families of the students that are served, and to bring that input to the school board and share that input with the administration. There's sort of a go-between, but they are responsible for making sure that the district is accountable to the taxpayers. When there are conflicts and need for resolution, I believe that what it really will take is getting input from the taxpayers, getting input from the families, and making sure that those views are made clear and follow the success for every student every day policy that is set by the school district.
Thank you. Candidate Eggert?
Could I ask you to repeat the question, Jackie?
Sure. What are the leadership responsibilities of school board members in collaboration in building consensus with administrators, parents, teachers, and community? And so describe past experience with conflict resolution, consensus building, seeking out ideas and feedback for your position on issues.
Okay. Well, I'd like to start with saying that board members are expected to represent all stakeholders, including students, families, staff, and community members. It's important to gather input from as many of those individuals as possible, as the board needs to consider all viewpoints when making decisions. That being said, it can be challenging to get input from everyone. This year, the board did receive a lot of direct communications from people, from a representative group of people, but obviously it's not from everyone. Going forward, the board is looking at a new governance model and formalizing a process for the board to connect with various groups regularly. And I believe this would help the board represent all stakeholders in a more comprehensive manner. But regarding conflict resolution or working together, a school board, you have 7 individual members, but people need to work together. And so a critical part that I live by is that you need to hear each other, you have discussions, and then you do want to come together to work and figure out a plan to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Candidate McGinley?
Thank you. So as elected officials, we are responsible to our taxpayers, our parents, and the students that are being served. That's what elected officials on a school board are responsible to do. They have other responsibilities, such as setting the budget, approving the budget, setting the curriculum. School board members are responsible to those taxpayers. They need to create, what I would recommend is a creation of a group, a committee, if you will, of parents that report directly to the board, of students that report directly to the board, so that you get that direct input. Parents, students, everybody in the community wants to be a part of this board. They want to be a part of our schools. They are funding our schools. So I think that's going to be critical to implement to get that feedback. Also, any conflicts that arise can be deviated if you're hearing all the voices that you need to hear. If you're listening to what the parents and the students and the community is saying, you can avoid conflict. But when it does arise, as we saw, that is something you have to work through. And you have to determine how to rebuild those relationships so that you can find every student every day has success. Thank you.
For our next round, we will start with candidate Eggert, then go to candidate Hartzheim, and then to candidate McGinley. And we're going to start off with a key question for this time, and it will be asked from a West High School student, Claire Wisniewski, representing Appleton West and the Talisman.
Hi, my name is Claire Wisniewski, and I am representing Appleton West High School and the Talisman student newspaper. My question is, how will you try to balance the wishes of parents in the school district with what the science says is safe in terms of school learning models and other activities?
That's a great question. And that has been the question of the year. And just for some grounding, when the pandemic started, was obviously, it disrupted everyone's lives. And life as we knew it changed, a lot of things changed. It was a brand new virus, little was known about it. There was, really not research or guidance good guidance that schools could use. So in balancing the decisions or making the decisions, it was critical and all along that the board and administration is reviewing the latest information available, working collaboratively with community partners as well as medical experts in the community, and then trying to create the best decision overall that would accommodate the students, the families, and the community at large. It is a challenging decision because there are so many stakeholders, and the decisions do impact so many people. There are 15,000 students in the district and 1,800 employees, as well as the community. So it's deliberate decision-making, taking the latest information into account.
Thank you, Candidate Eggert. Candidate Hartzheim.
This is a great loaded question, and a part of the reason that I decided to put my hat into the ring. I believe very strongly in using the word evidence rather than the word science. And there has been, because science is such a key, a buzzword right now. I believe that the evidence has shown what parents want is not unreasonable. What parents have wanted from the beginning was not unreasonable, and it's become more and more obvious with that evidence that is that school and extracurriculars are doable with the mitigation strategies that we've put forth. I wish that this district had taken those things into account earlier because, again, the evidence has been there for so long, but I understand that there was also community risk involved. I believe that the district had a very difficult decision to make at the beginning, but I believe that their timeline should have been pushed when the evidence became clear to them. And I think that that would have satisfied both the needs of the community as the safety needs of the community overall, but also the needs of the parents and the students for mental health, for their familial relationships, for their education.
Thank you. Candidate McGinley.
Thank you. So whether you call it science or evidence, it needs to be followed. However, there was clear proof that it was safe for schools to open. It was being called for well before this district opened. And this lack of opening when they did and when they could have reasonably, because they had those mitigation strategies in place at the beginning of the school year, and the school indicated that they were ready to go with those mitigation strategies, impacted our children that is going to last for years to come, with education gaps, increasing the achievement gap, and mental health issues. So I think you need to have a balanced approach. There's other ideas that should have been explored that I recommended, such as using community partners and businesses and community buildings to try to spread out students, and looking at every school as an individual district, almost like that school is the kids that we service for our school district. Instead of looking at it at 15,000, bring it down to a smaller scale and do it school by school by school to ensure our kids receive a free and appropriate education as they rightfully deserve.
Thank you. For our next question, we will start with Candidate McGinley, go to Candidate Eggert, and then to Candidate Hartzheim. What changes, if any, would you make to virtual learning to help engage students who are learning remotely? Let me start that one over. What changes, if any, would you make to virtual learning to help engage students who are learning remotely? And are there any changes made because of COVID that you think should stay in place once COVID is no longer a safety concern?
Okay, so to the first question, what changes should be made to virtual learning? I had recommended to the district to use, to have access to the classroom. Basically, you have the teacher on camera. This was done when I was in high school. The teacher is on the camera and you're all watching like you're in a classroom all throughout the day live, not in asynchronous. It would be actual live virtual learning like a lot of different districts in our area are doing. Unfortunately, that wasn't implemented. So I would be looking at something of more of live teaching, having a camera in the classroom to teach the students in their homes. So basically they're there. As for, what was the second part of that question?
Changes that were made because of COVID that you think should stay in place once COVID is no longer a safety concern.
I do think it is successful virtual learning for a lot of students, and a lot of parents may want to continue it. And I think that needs to be the case. The district should allow parents the decision to have in-person or virtual going forward. And if they feel it's successful and the student is successful, that is up to the parents to determine. And I think the school should have that option available.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Eggert.
The experience that students had with virtual learning did vary. It was effective for some students, but for some students, it was not effective. And some feedback that, well, I'm going to just back up. Recently, some board members, we had a chance to be a part of some focus groups with some high school students who were very candid and gave feedback on how things were going for them. And so based on some of those responses, some feedback was with some of the virtual situations, getting in touch with teachers consistently varied between classes. And granted, it was a tremendous challenge for teachers to be doing virtual as well as in-person instruction. So I think the situations where it's fully virtual probably was a better situation that teachers were not accommodating both virtual and in-person at the same time. But there certainly are students that have chosen to stay all virtual. Now, even with the opportunity to go back in person, they have found that it's working for them. And it actually is their learning method of choice. So I believe that some virtual education is here to stay, and we may find out that a blended learning model is actually advantageous for many students.
Thank you. Candidate Hartzheim?
I come from a little bit of a different perspective on virtual learning because my child is a student of classical charter school. And I believe that they did a very successful job of implementing virtual learning because they made it clear that the children will be responsible for being online for synchronous learning at all times. There was no, we'll watch it later. There's no, you can pick this up at any time whenever you wake up from your little nap, which many students took. So I believe that if we were to continue or have another opportunity that, and I don't say opportunity in a positive way, but if we had another potential need for virtual learning, I believe much more synchronous learning would make a big difference in how much the students are able to pick up through that learning model. I do believe that we should, as a district, continue to offer virtual learning to those students who it works for. If it's a success, then we should pursue it as a successful way to teach children. But we have to have metrics and we have to have goals that make it clear whether it is successful. And we have to also generate the curriculum that is appropriate to that and give our teachers the ability, the teachers who will be teaching that way, the ability to teach that in the most advantageous way for the children.
Thank you. For this next round, we'll start with candidate Eggert, go to candidate McGinley, and then candidate Hartzheim. So as a school board member, you will be asked to make many important school finance decisions. Provide us with some general thoughts on your approach to school budgets. What experience have you had with budgets? And would you, for example, advocate for an operating referendum to avoid cuts in school services or programs?
So budgets are all about priorities and choices. Overall, I support equitable educational opportunities for all. And in general, if adjustments need to be made to budgets, I would prioritize areas that do not directly impact students as far as staffing. I try to preserve staff. And, but also sometimes things get to a situation that the revenue increases don't keep up with the inflationary costs, and then more challenging decisions have to be made. In the past, there have been referendums to exceed operational expenses. I don't see those in the immediate future. If there is more likely that there would be a referendum that for facilities, and then very often you do add in some operational expenses with that. But so there's a lot more that we could talk about the budget. Maybe we'll have a follow-up question with that.
Candidate McGinley?
Thank you. So first of all, I wouldn't support any, I believe you asked, cuts in programs and services. I would not support that. The priority needs to be student learning and every child every day receiving a free and appropriate education. That is what the priority needs to be for the budget. As for referendums, there isn't currently one on the table, so I'm not going to discuss, I'm not going to go here nor there with that. The budget itself, experience with finance. So being a group home manager, I was responsible for all the financial accounts of all the individuals I oversaw. I also have worked in business and have been in management. So I have had to deal with a lot of different budgeting and a lot of different difficult decisions that impact the clients and impact the staff that I used to oversee. So I've had those tough decisions of how to budget appropriately for our clients to ensure that they receive the most services possible and to keep them safe, healthy, and happy in their group homes. So I have had experience with budgeting.
Thank you. Candidate Hartzheim.
I have the advantage here. I have owned and operated businesses. I have managed multiple businesses for some very large business owners. I have a financial background. I am more of I'm not a CMA, but I have management accounting experience, far more than public accounting experience, which is obviously far different. It's not taxation, it's internal accounting. And I have a fairly good friendly relationship with Greg Hartjes, and I believe that he is a great CFO leader. And I believe that through discussions with him and through my background with accounting, I am very willing and able to pitch in to look at what budget concerns we have, what budget constraints we have, and try to help the board to balance what is best for our district without moving to an operational referendum.
Okay, thank you. For this next round, we will start with candidate McGinley, go to candidate Hartzheim, and then candidate Eggert. To control the increasing cost of healthcare, the Appleton School Board has made significant design changes in the healthcare insurance offered to staff. These changes affect deductibles, premiums, and the choice of healthcare providers. How do you view these changes?
Absolutely. That was another profession that I also worked in healthcare. And also in the medical field, but also for insurance. So I am very familiar with insurance. I am very familiar with how all of it works. I understand from speaking to teachers that they have had struggles with the change that has been made with providers and deductibles and how much they are spending. So that is a huge concern. The most significant, I would say, that I heard is providers and access to that. I think that's unfair to do to them. I understand the idea behind having all the school districts sign on because it lowers the premium. But I think when making those decisions, you need to put the teachers first and the staff first, before necessarily the budget, if there is room for it. So that's that balance between the budget and finance and our teachers. So that was done, as the school board stated, to be able to give teachers a raise if they elected to do so. That's why they switched to the plan that they did. But I also think we needed to hear from more teachers as to what they wanted to have done with their insurance. Thank you.
Candidate Hartzheim.
Again, I have an advantage because I have worked with many businesses where we've had this same discussion. This is not something, I mean, anyone who has a job anywhere knows that this is a problem for businesses. Again, the district is a business just like anything else. So I understand that we needed to make a change in order to, as candidate McGinley said, make a trade-off, get a raise, change healthcare so that there's budgetary room. I believe that, again, as candidate McGinley stated, we need to get input from the teachers and administrators who are affected by this change rather than making the change automatically. But I'm not certain that the board didn't do that. This is always going to be a concern. We have to try to give our employees the best that we can give within budgetary constraints. So as we move forward, I think we should try to look at more creative options. I believe that what we're using now is an HSA for those folks, and I think that that's a great idea. I think other flexible spending accounts, et cetera, are good options. There's a plethora of options to look at, and I think that the district needs to keep all their options open as we move forward. I don't think that we've necessarily made a bad decision, although again, we've gotten feedback from teachers saying that it isn't great right now, but I think it's a balance that we have to keep working.
Thank you. Candidate Eggert.
Healthcare costs are a topic for any employer and any employee. And also, it needs to be considered that healthcare costs is one of the costs of benefits, and there is a, you should think of total compensation. You have salary and then also benefits. So changes as healthcare costs go up, and you're seeing premiums that are going to, or costs that are going to go up 8% a year. It's just not sustainable. And so there has been very concerted efforts to look at alternatives and other ways that you can bring down the healthcare costs, and also to allow for pay increases for the staff. So it's a, I would say, yeah, it needs to be considered as a package. And the discussions are done in communication with staff, representative staff, to talk about the potential changes. This last year, choice was allowed for staff members, and to pick one of two options. And because of the move to save some money, the employees were able to get a pay raise.
Thank you. For this next question, we will start with candidate Hartzheim, then candidate Eggert, then candidate McGinley. And I would like to introduce you to Sierra Cole, a student from Appleton North.
Hi, my name is Kieran, and I'm the Senior Editor-in-Chief of the Noctiluca at Appleton North High. My question is the following. Within the past few years, the AASD has made a push for new curriculum, new teaching methods, new technologies, and new standards-based grading practices. Then, the pandemic hit, and we were hit with another new. While all of this new has resulted in many benefits, growing pains have also emerged. And while there are always ways to improve, new doesn't always equate to better. If elected, how would you promote the balance between modernizing classrooms and teaching techniques while still offering staff and students the flexibility to keep up old practices that worked well? Thank you. Hi, my name is...
That is an excellent question. I'm very impressed with our high school folks. That speaks a lot to this district. New curriculum, new standards, new methods of teaching, new testing, all of those things, again, as he mentioned, are going to create growing pains. And again, as he mentioned, the pandemic just exacerbated them. I think that we need to give ourselves a break in this regard. I think we need to, as he mentioned, go back to some of the things that were successful. I think we need to look to our teachers, look to our folks who know how to present these things, and look to them to give us the answers as to what our best practices. They know best because this is what they have done. If there is something extremely successful that works for our children to learn, then those teachers should have every right to be able to follow them. But then we have to look at how curriculum across the entire district is managed. So it's a very delicate balance, but I think that there's a good way for us to look at what's been a success and what's not been a success, and then replace those things that haven't been successful with those that potentially will be, knowing that there's going to be some growing pains in the meantime. Again, very delicate balance, but I love that they're asking these kinds of questions because this is what the teachers want as well. They want to give to their students the best education.
Thank you. Candidate Eggert?
Well, curriculum adoption, it's always a cycle. And when new standards are, it starts with the standards. And if there are new standards that maybe come out at the state level, and then the district reviews standards, and then that converts, then based on those standards, then staff work groups actually develop the curriculum. And then once the curriculum is developed, then staff also select materials that would support the curriculum. Now, and then it gets down to the art of teaching within the classroom. And that's where, so the teacher still does have the flexibility and can then use the curriculum and the materials that are adopted, but then can have the flexibility in the classroom to deliver it in the way that the teacher finds to be the most effective. So I think people are always looking for, what's most effective, best practices. As our folks are developing curriculum and selecting materials, they consult with a large group. They want to make sure that the curriculum is culturally sensitive, that it reflects all students, and it also considers special populations, the special education, and the EL students.
Thank you. Candidate McGinley?
Thank you. I think his question is a very good question that I would like to hear what he thinks needs to be done. I think we need to hear from the students what they think would help them, and the parents what they think would help their children. The teachers, getting feedback from the teachers is going to be the most important. They are on the front lines. They see it. Our parents, teachers, and students see it, breathe it, live it. So hearing from them is what's going to be critical. During this pandemic, with the gaps that occurred, it's going to be even more critical to everybody's kind of all over the place because some it worked, some it didn't. So to get everybody up to grade level is going to take time, and it's going to have to be a little bit more individualized. So I kind of go back to what he said in his question. We need to ask him what he thinks needs to be done. We need to ask all of our students that. So curriculum always changes. There are state standards, but the school board does set the curriculum. That is up to the school board. So, but it doesn't negate the fact that they can hear from our parents, students, and the community and our teachers.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll start with candidate Eggert and go to candidate McGinley and then go to candidate Hartzheim. So a question came up about the mixture of both traditional and standards-based grading courses in student schedules at the high school level. So percentages, types of assignments, and what counts toward their grade is different between the two models, and it's confusing for some students. What are your thoughts?
Jackie, I'm sorry, the transmission of the question didn't come through.
Oh,
Could you
sorry.
just repeat that, please?
Absolutely. Maybe I'll speak more directly into my microphone. So a question came up about the mixture of both traditional and standards-based grading courses in student schedules. Percentages, types of assignments, and what counts towards grades is different between the two models, and it's confusing for some students. What are your thoughts?
So the standards-based grading is where we are headed with the high school courses. But the work to have all the courses developed so that they are able to do the standards-based grading takes time. And so right now would be a transition time. But the thought behind it is that it's very much able to measure, what are the big concepts that are trying to be taught in the course, and whether or not the student actually learns those concepts. And so I could imagine it could be confusing during a transition time. I believe that the move to the standards-based grading is a best practice, and it is well grounded in the way that we should go in the future.
Candidate McGinley.
Thank you. I could see why that would be confusing for students. Going from a student myself to a parent and seeing that change was just as confusing. But I think we need to measure the students on their own progress. And I also believe that too much time is spent preparing for standardized testing, which it could be looked at as biased. So I think the most important thing we could do is measure each student based on their own progress and how they succeed, especially considering the pandemic and now the state that we're in.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Hartzheim.
I understand that standards-based grading is best practice, as candidate Eggert mentioned, but I think that we have to educate on education. We have to show our children, especially our high school students who are very knowledgeable about what their grade is made up of. We have to tell them how are they being graded and what they can expect. If we cannot do a good job of communicating with them what their expectations are, then how are they ever going to meet them? So I believe that the confusion comes from two things. One, this switching over sort of thing, but also then from the standards-based grading needs to be better explained to families, to teachers, or to students, so that they know what those expectations are. And especially, I believe that parents need to be taught this too, or at least come to a greater understanding of it, because we are not always certain. What does this mean? How is this weighted? We understand what equates an A, what equates a B, what equates a C out of the traditional methods of grading. We don't know where these other things are coming from. So I believe that education needs to educate. And if we can do that, then we can successfully make this transition between these two methods.
Thank you. So for the next question, we will start with candidate Hartzheim, go to candidate McGinley, and then candidate Eggert. How do you view the parental choice program and the special needs scholarship programs that siphon taxpayer dollars from the public schools to private and sometimes religious schools? Would you support an expansion of the program? And as a school board member, how would you protect the interest of Appleton area school district students?
I believe that siphon is a very loaded word that perhaps should be removed from the question, because while dollars do come out of a school's budget, a public school's budget, if a student goes to a private school instead of public school, We're not removing the dollars from that district. We're removing the child from that district, and dollars need to follow the children. I understand there's a great argument in this regard. I support private schools voucher system because I believe that only competition will make for better schools. If we hold AASD to the gold standard of education, we have nothing to worry about. People will not leave our school district because we are the gold standard of education. So I understand where folks are coming from when they're concerned that dollars are, quote, siphoned from public education, and when a child chooses or when a family chooses to access the voucher system. But I don't believe that it is a detriment. I believe that it is a way for us to get better so that we can retain those students. There is no doubt that people will want to choose AASD if we are the top-notch gold standard in education.
Candidate McGinley?
So this question is difficult because as a board member, you can't necessarily change vouchers or SNSP. That comes from a state level. The most you could do is sign on to a WASB when they submit their legislation that they're advocating for. That's the most you could do. Or you could advocate for it, but that's about it through WASB as a school board member. We can't change it as board members. However, I will say for the special needs scholarship program, which is SNSP, which a district here, a private school here accepts SNSP. I am not, as a parent of a special needs student, I do not support special needs scholarship program. That is 100% funding of the need. So that is something that is a bigger concern to me, would be the SNSP program, especially considering we have a school here in Appleton that is accepting SNSP vouchers. So that's where I would stand on vouchers.
Thank you. Candidate Eggert?
Well, I would oppose any further expansion of private school vouchers. I would also support implementing accountability and transparency measures for private schools that receive public school dollars. Right now, this last year, the district passed on $3.3 million to private schools, but then that actually was recouped from district taxpayers. So I would support revision to the Wisconsin property tax bill so that would be transparent and taxpayers could see how much money is being levied to finance private schools. I would also support greater public accountability for voucher schools in areas such as the use of licensed teachers, state instructional requirements, due process for students with disabilities and those sorts of things. And I also would support a change in the state law that would remove the resident school district's responsibility for any per pupil special needs scholarship program costs above the statutory payment. So, and then in closing, I would just say extensive research has not proven that vouchers improve student outcomes.
Thank you. For the next round, we will start with candidate Eggert, go to candidate Hartzheim, and then candidate McGinley. Many experts believe that effective teachers have the highest influence on student achievement. What approach do you propose for the AASD to attract and retain qualified, effective teachers?
Well, I agree that quality teachers are key to the success of our students. And so attracting and retaining high quality teachers has to be a high priority. And I know it is within the district. To make this, excuse me, data also indicates that there's a declining trend in the number of individuals seeking and staying with a career in education. And the trend also predicts a high level of turnover of of educators. So there are a number of strategies that are important. First, offering competitive compensation and benefits. Also investing in our staff by providing relevant induction and mentoring of new staff, and then also providing relevant and meaningful professional development so individuals can grow in their profession. I think it's also important that we consistently assess the work environment. We want a positive, safe environment, one in which all employees feel valued. Long-term, we need to promote education for the valuable and vital career that it is. And I would also support easing restrictions at the state level or in the legislature on hiring retired educators to fill key positions. And there is also some suggestion about—
Thank you. Thank you. Candidate Hartzheim?
I would like to echo candidate Eggert in saying that I believe that we at AASD have a plethora of highly effective teachers and that we need to continue to retain them. I have seen greatness through the pandemic, through the worst of our children trying to learn virtually. So I applaud that, and I want to help our district to retain those folks as well. And I would use the same methodologies that were mentioned by candidate Eckert: compensation, benefits packages, mentoring, and professional development. But most of all, I would like to give our teachers a listening ear and give them an open forum so that they do not fear retribution if they disagree with something that is occurring within the district or within their own school environment. I believe that that is one thing that will retain our teachers and attract new teachers to our district if we are the best at listening to them. Also, if we are the gold standard of education, there isn't a teacher who isn't going to want to be in our district. So if we can prove that we are successfully mentoring and managing our district, then teachers will want to come. If you build it, they will come.
You, Candidate McGinley.
I don't know that I could have said that better. I think, very good. I think, absolutely. I've talked with a number of teachers who fear retribution for coming forward. I think that is unacceptable. You need to listen to teachers and be unbiased. You do not need to hold it against them or they will not come forward. I think there is also, as you said, the benefits, the compensation, the ability to grow and move up in departments, mentorship. All of that is going to be important to attract a teacher and retain it. And if we have great schools, teachers are going to want to come teach at great schools. There was also recently the governor's board changed some licensures, the licenses for teachers. And I would agree with more changes potentially, depending on how they look, but I would definitely agree with some sort of changes to the teacher licensing. They now have the lifetime licensure under the new legislation that was done. So I definitely agree with that. And I could see more improvements and more additions to that to keep teachers and retain teachers that may be retired.
Thank you. For this next question, we will start with Candidate Hartzheim, go to Candidate McGinley, and then Candidate Eggert. And I would like to introduce you to a student from East High School. Miles Hurley has this question for you.
Hi, my name is Miles Hurley, and I'm a freshman at Appleton East High School. And my question for the school board was about overcrowded classrooms and buildings. I just want to know some of the ideas or possible solutions you would have in mind that would give students a better environment to learn and work in. Thank you.
Again, I applaud the students of our district. They're very well informed, apparently. The issue of overcrowding is a difficult one. On the table now are some discussions about referendums. just this past week in both committee meetings and on the regular board meeting, we were sort of told that these sort of things are being floated within the district again. My concern there is that we still need to focus on student learning before we focus on spending more money to grow our schools. However, overcrowding doesn't go away without a referendum. There are other opportunities within the district, though. I believe that, as candidate McGinley mentioned earlier on, there are ways that we can partner with locations, businesses throughout the district. There are ways around all of these things. There are certainly creative methods that we could use. There are, again, it's a cross-disciplinary decision to be made. And I think that we can bring in lots of creative thoughts and ideas from the community if we solicit them. I think that could be a short-term solution before we get to the point where we are able to discuss an actual referendum.
Thank you. Candidate McGinley.
Thank you. So, well, this takes me back. So this was pre-pandemic when there was talk of referendum, when I was actually going in person to board meetings. And that was almost, feels like 2 years ago. So the biggest overcrowding that was discussed at those board meetings was, I believe, Huntley, and being very large, and that had overcrowding issues. But there were schools like Edison that doesn't have overcrowding and has plenty of space. Is there a way, I always wondered, even at the board meetings, is there a way to use the resources in the buildings that we have to change things for students so that maybe we don't have to build a whole new school? Or can we use community buildings? There was talk of closing Columbus. Can we keep Columbus open? Is there different strategies we can use? And we need to explore all options for that, because it is overcrowded. I have seen kids being used in closets that were once used for closets, kids are now using for space. So I have seen it at schools when I was on the PTO even. So this goes back some time. But I think we need to explore all options. Absolutely explore all options before making a determination on what to do next. Because there are spaces like Edison that are available.
Thank you. Candidate Eggert.
So prior to the pandemic, community groups, our community group was formed and looked in depth at the needs of the district, space needs, and completed their work, and then got to the point of passing it on to the school board to consider, okay, what to do next. And I believe that that is worthy to revisit in time. I think we need to get all the kids back in school and just then move on once we've gotten through and we've got all our children back into the school building. But when there are, in addition to the space needs, another big consideration was potentially moving the sixth graders into the middle schools, as that more aligns with middle school curriculum, to do a 6-8 instead of just a 7-8. So there are other components to it, but it was just to the point, these community groups that, the community group that really looked in depth at the needs of the district provided a lot of good information for the school board. And I think that that plan needs to come back out, look at it again. Again, they'll get some community input to see where we're at, and then look at it in a very comprehensive manner. So,
Thank you. For our next round, we will start with candidate McGinley, then candidate Eggert, and then candidate Hartzheim. So Central is an alternative educational program that provides more individualized instruction and support for students who benefit from a different environment than the traditional high school setting. So Dre Lederhaus from Central has stepped forward with this question for you.
Good morning and or afternoon. My name is Andre Lederhaus and I am a Central High School student. The question I have for all potential candidates for the school board member position is, what can you do to make sure that the Appleton Area School District is validating all students to make sure that they are feeling welcomed, comfortable, and wanted. Thank you.
Ready?
Mhm.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the question. I would wonder why he asked that question if he's not feeling that way. Living downtown, I'm very familiar with Central High School. Every student needs to feel comfortable and safe in their school. I think one way to do that is by listening to our students and hearing what our students have to say. If there is a concern that needs to be brought to the board's attention. And if we create committees with students and parents and different groups, you're going to hear those concerns and you're going to hear feedback of how can we make you feel more welcome? How can we make you feel more safe? So that the school board will have those ideas of what the actual students in the schools are thinking, the teachers are thinking, the parents are thinking, which I think is important. But my biggest question for him is, why does he have that question? That concerns me, because he should feel comfortable, safe, welcome, and validated in any question or concern he may have.
Thank you. Candidate Eggert?
It was a great question, and I appreciate that. One of the 4 guiding pillars for the district is to ensure a safe and welcoming environment for all. It's a serious, fundamental goal. It has established measurements. It's monitored. Results are reported. Staff development is created around that. And the objective relies heavily on the creation of creating positive relationships with students and families. So it starts there, and it's really important, and it's the being able to create the relationships. As a board member, I would support cultivating the trust and welcoming environments that we really need to have optimal learning. But a way also to monitor it is through surveys. I know we are starting to institute student surveys, and we do have family surveys and staff surveys that people can identify how they feel about the culture in the school, how they're feeling, if they're being supported, and then from that, we can look at the data for areas of strength and then areas that we need to improve on. So I appreciate the question. It's a very serious and it's a very fundamental goal for the district. And I think it's something that we need to continue to work at.
Candidate Hartzheim.
I listen regularly to an educator of educators named Ken Williams, and he says that we should always begin by painting the picture of the perfect school or the perfect district, and then map out the behaviors to get there. And I think we kind of forget those sorts of things when we're in the midst of doing everything that we do on a daily basis. And I applaud this student for coming forward with the bravery to say, hey, how are you going to not forget about us? We're in the mix of doing all of the day-to-day operations that we do to try to educate our children. And we forget that we're dreaming and moving forward with this dream of the perfect school. So I would look to people like Ken Williams for ideas on how to help our children feel validated. I believe candidate Eggert came up with a very good idea, or stated a very good idea, that it starts with families, it starts with teacher connection to students, it starts with all of those interconnections. But again, I would look to folks like Ken Williams, et cetera, for ideas on how to make those connections, especially with our Black and Brown students, especially with, again, students like these at Central who are in need of a different environment for school.
Thank you. For this next question, we'll start with candidate Hartzheim, go to candidate McGinley, and then candidate Eggert. It kind of flows from the other question, and I'll try not to have too many acronyms in this one. How do you plan to support BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color youth and LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning in the curriculum and in addressing any behavioral, interpersonal, or disciplinary issues that arise without the use of police or in schools?
That's an extremely complex and loaded question that I will openly admit that I do not know enough about, but I am a listener and wanting to know more about those sorts of things. I would look to folks like candidate McGinley, who knows a lot about all of these things and has worked with folks to help to build bridges. I would also look to other educators in other districts. I would look to folks who have practiced this regularly. Again, I reflect back to Ken Williams. He has many methodologies for reaching out to students who don't necessarily feel welcomed or necessarily feel like the standards work for them. So again, I would openly admit I don't know enough to be able to make a statement about how we can support them, but I am open and willing to look at every single opportunity that comes about in that regard.
Thank you. Candidate McGinley?
Thank you. You stated a little bit quite fast, but I will, that's okay. I won't make you repeat it. So when it comes to our minority students, as a parent of students who are Hispanic, and the only candidate here that has children of color, I will absolutely support all students. As far as the curriculum changes, the school board does set the curriculum. So you are one of 7. I will support persons of color and their ideas if something is brought forward. Obviously, if legislation comes down that you have to do, I would support that, but absolutely I will support LGBTQ and persons of color in any way that I can.
Candidate Eggert?
I would love for you to repeat the question, but I know it was quite long. So
It was long because of the acronyms. I'm happy to do that. How do you support Black, Indigenous, and people of color youth and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning in the curriculum and in addressing any behavioral, interpersonal, or disciplinary issues that might arise without the use of police in schools?
Okay, so the curriculum piece first. I think a little bit earlier when we talked about curriculum, as our district employees who are writing the curriculum, they are very conscious and they have guiding principles that they attend to, and that the curriculum needs to be developed and needs to consider the lens through culturally, different cultures. Students need to be able to see themselves in the materials. They need to be able to identify or relate to students like them. And so the curriculum and the materials need to be inclusive so that they feel welcomed and that they feel included in the curriculum. So, and then, back to just the culture in a school, it does go back to working on those positive relationships that are built between the school staff and the students, and also for the families, so that the families can advocate for their students.
Okay. For our next question, penultimate question, we'll start with candidate McGinley, go to candidate Eggert, and then candidate Hartsign. So this year has been a difficult year. 30% of high school students are failing at least a class. So that's going to affect class offerings. So we have the dual tug here. We have to help those students catch up and do well, and we have a responsibility to those students who need the arts to keep those things going. And we have a commitment to our top-notch students to make sure that they have those continuing elective courses. So, and those advanced courses. So what's your plan? How are we going to do this?
I like the ending. So I am very, very concerned. I think the whole community is concerned by these failing rates we have seen and all these Fs and incompletes that we have seen. I think, as I said before, it's something that's going to take years to recoup. I do not want to discount talented and gifted. Arts or any type of form of students, you have special education, talented, everything needs to stay. Okay, you have talented and gifted. The arts are important. Special education is important. And we do need to catch students up. So we need to lean on the community. What community partners can come in to assist? Do we need to change our schedule in education and maybe have longer summer school or longer school years until the students are caught up? Those all options need to be on the table and all options need to be explored, but we need to still look at each child as an individual to ensure that every child receives free and appropriate education, or FAP, in this school district. And the ones that were failing are brought back up to par and back on date for graduation. So does that mean increased staff? Again, all options need to be looked at, but we can look to our community and our parents because we're all here. We all want to help.
Candidate Eggert.
So obviously the failures and the incompletes are a concern, and there is work to do to adequately address these concerns. The COVID, the pandemic impacted different students differently. And so the approach needs to be very individualized, really to identify what is the missed learning, and then to target those areas of concern with resources and very targeted instruction. And keeping open the time frame that a student can just make up the missed learning and then still get the credit for the course. I think that is going to be very helpful for the high school students. And so going forward, the district, as well as others across, all the districts in the state are going to be getting additional money through the federal government to address the impacts of COVID. Excuse me. And so that'll be money that can be spent over the next 2.5 years. The district is immediately looking at what is the best way to allocate these funds. And targeting, it can be additional staff, additional people, it could be programs. It's just everything right now is on the table, and just looking at best practices and putting heads together on the best way to address these concerns.
Candidate Hartzheim.
Thanks. This is the most loaded question you've given us tonight, Jacqueline. Thank you. I believe, first of all, we need to know where we stand. So we need to actually have a clear accounting of where we are. I don't know whether that requires a testing baseline or what that requires at this point, but I believe that we need to know where we stand so that we can bridge to where we need to be. I hate to reflect again to Ken Williams, but he always says we teach to the top and scaffold up the rest. We give the top quality, we give those high achievers exactly what they need, and we scaffold everyone else to grow to that potential. I know we can do two things at once. I know we can do many things at once, but I think this district needs to make this our number one priority. I think we need to put aside any large initiatives in any other direction until we have this under our belts and under control. I know that's super easy for us to say, but I believe that if we put our minds into it, we will succeed in this regard. But if our minds are scattered elsewhere on other priorities, I don't believe that success will be as eminent for us.
Thank you. And for this last question, did that ring a bell? Yeah, okay. Last question. We'll start with candidate Eggert, go to candidate Hartzheim, and then candidate McGinley. I'll remind everybody that I do have some closing comments after everyone is finished here. So in closing, identify the two biggest issues facing AASD and what you would propose to face those issues.
And I'm first. I would say that the two biggest priorities for facing the district right now are the impact of the pandemic on our students and addressing the academic, the social, and the emotional needs of our students. And I think we spoke to that a little bit earlier, but again, just targeting, identifying individually needs, and because the impact has impacted people in different ways. And then I think the other very large priority does relate to our staffing. I am concerned about the trend data, and that there's a workforce shortage, and it leads to a lot of turnover. And we know that ultimately what creates effectiveness in the classroom is high quality teachers. And so those are the two biggest priorities. And earlier we did speak to what can we do about retaining and recruiting and retaining high quality staff. But those are the two biggest priorities that I see.
Candidate Hartzheim.
Well, I think that it would be easy for me to say we need to catch our kids up, and that's the biggest priority. That is an overarching priority that is included in the two things that I see are the biggest issues within our district. First, I believe that we need to get a better handle on parental, familial, and teacher input in this education experience. I believe there's too much of a centralized sort of fishbowl mentality within the district. I think we need a lot more community input. So I want us to build some community bridges, just like Dr. Scullin built within the neighborhoods of Appleton Area School District. And then secondarily, I believe that CEO accountability, so superintendent accountability, administration accountability to the board and to the taxpayers needs to be another big priority for our district. We need to have regular metrics measuring, and we need to see where we stand, not just what the state is requiring of us, but we need to see, as board members, we need to see on a regular basis where we stand and where we are failing. We can't wait for multiple years to see what those sorts of things are. And I believe that we're on that track now, because I believe that Steve Harrison has come up with some ways to get those sorts of things moving forward. But for a long, long time, we had a void of information and metrics.
Thank you. Candidate McGinley.
I see a few things. I don't disagree with either of you. So first of all, the first thing I see as the biggest issue in AASD has changed, but it would be communication. Communication between parents, families, students, teachers. That lack of communication in the current surveys that are out there doesn't really communicate with parents. Parents were left scrambling, didn't understand what was going on. That tells me there's no communication. When you don't know, there's not communication. So that's the number one issue. Better communication will help our students succeed. I think the achievement gap has grown huge. That would be my second concern, and the issues of COVID and everything surrounding it. So the achievement gap has become even worse than what it was pre-pandemic, and that was an issue as far back as I can even remember. So I think focusing on our students, putting our students back in school 5 days a week for all students K through 12, and working to get our students to where they need to be, or if they're excelling, even better than where they're at. So again, those individualized plans, communicating with parents, teachers, students, and the community, and holding accountable, well, as Sherry said, the superintendent and administration, because they're the ones at the top.
Great. Thank you all for the time that you have put into this, and for your answers. And I have, like I said, just a few things I want to share. I do have to thank besides the candidates, I have to thank the members of the league who helped make this forum possible. Jean, Julie, our timekeeper, Dave, and Barb, who are the tech people who made this whole thing happen and work. I have to thank Maria, our interpreter, Shirley, Brian. I know there are others, but this is a special forum when we invite the students in. And so I really have to thank Claire, Sierra, Mike, Andre for their very positive questions and role in this. And I need to thank not just the administrators from those schools, but also the teachers, Mr. Osmond, Mr. Kurth, Mr. Ramponi, and Mr. Shimmick, because they were the go-between. They were key in making this happen. And I have to just publicly acknowledge my appreciation to them. So what do we have on the screen now? We have more forums. So coming up tomorrow, we have the Appleton City Council Forum for District 1, and you can read here. You just need to know which forum, which district you are in. All of these are going to be on Zoomed and live streamed. Just notice that they're 6:30 to 7:30, except for March 15th, which starts at 7, because the league has a program from that starts at like 5:30 to 6:30. So that was a little difficult. And also we have a number of districts in the city of Appleton that are actually in Calumet County. So for those residents of Calumet County in the city of Appleton, know that you will have a Calumet County Circuit Court Branch 2 forum on March 18th. And then reminders are that voting is on, election day is the 6th. However, online voter registration is open until the 17th. Voter registration after that date can be done at the clerk's office or on election day, but then you do need to have both proof of residence and ID. Online absentee ballot requests, go to myvote.wi.gov. Those mail-ins, you're suggested that you have those mailed in a week before. That would be March 23rd. So in-person absentee voting starts Monday, March 23rd, and goes to April 2nd during regular hours. Now check with your municipalities for what those exact times might be. Okay, and you can do that by going to City of Appleton or going to My Vote. And then there's just one more slide, the recordings. If you are in District 11, there is a recording from last night's forum already on our website. And that this will be posted as soon as possible, as soon as our wonderful tech people can make it happen. Also, I want to remind people that if you live alone and you have requested an absentee ballot, the league, you can contact the league and we will help with witnessing that absentee ballot. We know all the proper rules and procedures. So we know that some people have been left in that situation. So we are there for you. So if you want to check your registration, get that absentee ballot requested, track your absentee ballot, all of that good stuff is on myvote.wi.gov. And for nonpartisan voter information, vote 411. And I'm going to wish everyone a good evening, and we hope that you will join us at future forums. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You
Thank
too.
you.